All right, so let's go back to this viewport, and we can use this viewport to sort of adjust the lighting, and this viewport to just look at the scene and how it looks. Okay, one thing which I'm going to be doing is that let me go back to my render settings, and I can just go down to sampling and then viewport, and let me just turn on denoising just so that we can have a better look at this with the denoising on, so that we don't have to wait for it to sort of render as much. And the denoiser, I'm going to set it to optics. Be sure to set it to optics if you have an NVIDIA RTX graphic card. I don't know if you need an NVIDIA RTX graphic card, but I think NVIDIA card is important. But I'm don't quote me on that. I'm not exactly sure. So you can just Google that and see what happens. So the start sample, I'm going to set it to 2 or 3, because the reason for that is because when we're moving it, so we move it smoothly, right? If it's set to 1, you're going to see that it's going to basically not move smoothly, and it's going to like have those weird artifacts. So I don't want those. So I'm just going to set it to 2. And let me turn this on and go back to the camera like that. Let's zoom in, and now we can just sort of work on the lighting. So one thing which I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to be changing the shape of these lights. So I'm going to scale them down in the x-axis and scale them a little up in the z-axis. It's just good for it's just generally good for, you know, product visualization shots that you have long lights. That's what I've seen, at least with professional artists. What they do is they basically just use sort of those sort of lights, and I think something like that should be a good position for this light. Although I'm not really concerned about this light as much, the main thing I'm concerned about is this light. So we might have to scale it down in the x-axis as well, like that, and place it somewhere where it's like okay, we might need to tweak the material of this a little bit. What we can do is we can maybe make it a little brighter, a little bit like that, probably, and metallic. Yeah, I think it was fine before. How about we increase the wattage of this to 50? I think that looks good. That doesn't look bad. And we can probably go back and change this to base contrast, because in this specific render, I don't think adding more contrast makes it look better. It just makes it look like very, so it's sort of weird. Let me change the color of this to a dark black and reduce and increase the roughness a little bit, something like that. What if I don't make it metallic? How does that? So right now, as you can see, what we're basically doing is that we're just doing some trial and error, and that's all you're supposed to do in 3D or in any sort of art. Basically, the main thing is just trial and error. Just try to see what looks good and what doesn't, and then you can make your decisions according to that. And the reason why I don't cut these parts out is so I want you to see the actual process of like me as a 3D artist, and because usually I personally don't like tutorials on YouTube or Udemy or whatever, which like just show you like the perfect process of how it's done, and they don't show you like the actual struggle behind the thing and what sort of problems they faced. Because then what happens is that when people are making work themselves, what they do is they expect it to go as perfectly as the guy who made the video. However, when it doesn't, they just get sort of discouraged and stuff like that. So I think my job here is just to show you like the real and like the raw uncut workflow of me as a 3D artist. So that's what I'm trying to do. Okay, so yeah, I think this looks pretty good. I think we are pretty close to the actual reference. And okay, this part doesn't quite look good. Maybe because color needs to be a little darker, probably. Roughness maybe 0.15. I think that should be fine. Yeah, I think I'm pretty satisfied with this, and I think the lighting looks a lot better than it was before. So yeah, I think we are pretty much good to go. Let me just play the animation once just to see how it looks, and then we can go ahead and just render it out. I like how the lighting looks in this now compared to before, because before the problem was that it was way too, it was sort of too bright and it wasn't looking good. It was overexposed. And this part too, I think it looks pretty decent. The dial looks pretty good as well. One thing which you can do is you can add sort of like a normal map to the dial to make it look better. Yep, I think it looks pretty decent. So now what we can do is we can just set the last frame. The last frame was, I think, 475. And so start should be 1, end should be 475, or wherever your last frame is. And once you are ready, you can just go to render settings. And so basically the render samples, you can set them to anything around like, I think anything above a few hundred should be fine. Because usually when I'm like rendering stuff, what I like to do is I like to sort of turn on my denoiser and turn on the denoise which I'm going to be using in my render. So I usually use open image denoise, and what I do is I turn off the noise threshold, right? And I basically turn on the guide so I can like see how many samples there are, and I just sort of eyeball it, and I try to see when is the point when it starts to like, look good. So right now it's 20 samples, it looks pretty bad. 50 samples, 100 samples, and I think in my case probably something like 300 samples should be good. Yeah, and I would recommend you to like sort of eyeball it in your viewport just to see how it looks, right? So I think 300 samples should be fine. Because obviously if you go above that, it's going to look better, but then again, it's going to sort of take more time to render, right? So I think 300 samples in my situation should be good. And I think the original animation that I showed you, that was also rendered in 300 samples. So we should be good to go. Let me see what happens if I increase the contrast. Does it look better or worse? I honestly think it kind of looks better. Yeah, I think it looks better. So I'm just going to go with that. And once we are ready, we can go to output settings and the output, set the output file to whatever we want. So I'm going to go to desktop, and let me create a new folder. Call it watch underscore. Actually, let me call this course underscore animations. And then I can add a watch animation to this, accept, and just accept. All right, so once we are ready to render, we can just go ahead and click render and render animation. Now this is going to take some time. You have to be patient in this. For me, the render on my computer, I have a RTX 4080, but it's a laptop version. So for me, it took around, I think, 3 hours or something like that. Three or 3.5 hours. So yeah, I'm assuming if you have a similar computer, it's going to take similar time for you. But again, your render times are going to be totally based off of your hardware. But yeah, so when this is done, I'll see you. What we're going to be doing next is that we are going to be editing this, color grading this inside of Premiere Pro. We're going to be cutting it up and then color grading it. So that's essentially it. I'll see you when it's done.